Without further ado, I'm very excited to welcome two of my friends and coworkers to the stage, Chelsea Nealand and Marcus Armstrong.
Hello, everyone. We are beyond excited to be here. So let us tell you a little bit about why we got this journey that we're going to talk about started and what we were looking for. Marcus?
Yeah, so for those of you who do not know, we do this study every single year called the Internet Adventure Study. And the whole idea and the premise behind this study is to figure out how prospective renters are using the internet to find their next home, right? Like that's the general baseline here. But you will see on the screen, this is the journey no renter wants to take. If you're curious about that tagline, well, it's actually pretty simple, and you can actually read the little text box right here, but it's how are we unintentionally creating a difficult journey for renters, and what can we learn from their apartment selection behaviors? Really just trying to take a look at what is causing all of these difficulties, right? We started hearing from prospects, started hearing from other industry sources that the entire apartment search process was becoming very difficult.
We heard over and over again how hard it was for renters to find what they needed, get the information they needed, and decide on an apartment to lease. But it's not just about the renter all the time. We know that you are also having a hard time, right? As owners, operators, investors, it's difficult to figure out how to be the apartment community that wins that lease. And that is what this little tiny blue apartment here represents. This is the one apartment that gets chosen. It almost sometimes can feel like a random lottery win, right? Kind of a big win. And unfortunately right now, this is what the market looks like. And these are actual numbers. We'll explain them a little bit later to you, but I want to give you a really brief visualization of what it looks like. This is all the competition that you're dealing with in the market to win over that prospective renter. But wait, like Allie said, unfortunately, there's more bad news. This is all the single family home rentals that are also competing with you for this one renter who's looking now at a broader scope than they've ever looked before and trying to make a decision based on a ton of information, and they're more open than they've ever been before. So we knew from listening to renters that things had changed, and we wanted to understand exactly what that was. So I want to point out some things about our study that are really important and key to know. The first thing is we actually looked at people who had looked for a rental in the last 6 to 12 months to be our survey respondents. Here's why. While we love everyone equally, right? We did not want to ask someone, hey, how did you look for your apartment if they've lived in an apartment or a rental for 4 or 5 years? Because the world has changed. Things are very, very different now than they were before. We were lucky to have a ton of responses. We had over 3,700 responses, and these were all from renters in the United States. We had a great mix of demographics, with 49% of our respondents being male, 51% female, because who runs the world? Sorry. And we decided to look at this information in a couple different ways. So not only by female and male or by age demographics, but we wanted to look at it generationally and then also by life stage. Now you might be thinking, Chelsea, life stage, generation, same thing. No, here's why. Marcus and I were talking a lot about millennials because I am really embarrassed to say that I am an elder millennial. I don't know who came up with that term, but I hate them. And the youngest millennial today is 25. And there's a big difference in the priorities of a 25-year-old and however old you might be to be classified as an elder millennial.
27.
Yeah, apparently, 27. But there's a different life stage that you are in, even though you might be in the same generation. Agree? So we looked at generations, but then also we broke this into life stages of student, young professional, adult, active adult, and elder, which I am going to embarrass Marcus and say originally he just called old. Okay, but we changed it to make it better and just say elder. So our age totals for this study were here with our generations. Our Gen Z, we had about 21% of our respondents in Gen Z. So y'all, my student housing providers, you're really going to want to pay attention to their answers throughout this study. But really everyone in the rental space needs to pay attention to their answers because these generations are moving up, right? And their behaviors are not necessarily changing. It's indicative of what you are going to have to do to be ahead of the market. And then we had millennials. We are the largest generation right now, yeah, at 37%. Gen X at 26%, and boomers at 14%. And then here was the breakdown of those life stages that we talked about.
So, when conducting this study, we really did this in a few different stages here. And the first part of the data collection was one-on-one interviews. Previously, doing the Internet Adventure study, what we had done is just sent out the survey to prospective renters. They answered the same set of questions, which is great, right? We have all this historical information and data. But we wanted to take a different approach this year. We said, we think that there's probably something different, and Ali touched on it with the economy, right? There is something different that's happening right now. And so what we decided to do is at first conduct these one-on-one interviews with prospective renters. And the way we did that is we got them on a Zoom call, just said, hey, we want you to tell us how you're searching for an apartment. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to sit here, open up your computer. How did you search for your apartment? And the reason we did that is because we wanted to see if there were any points of contact, right? Anything that was very similar across all the different apartment searches. And then from there, we were able to create this survey. So that's the survey collection process. Third part of this stage right here is what I talked about a second ago, just the historical data that we have from the previous Internet Adventure studies, and then the supplemental studies that we've done at J. Turner Research. I have a bunch of data that we can go off of and add together. So if we are thinking about prospective renters looking for their new home, we have to first start with saying, why are renters moving? To y'all, it's probably not a huge surprise for me to tell you that people are not going from living at mom and dad and then their first apartment, right? That's not the majority of people who are looking for rentals right now. It's people who are already renting and electing to find a different rental. So we had this question, what is your primary reason for not renewing your lease? 34.2% of the people who said they're not choosing to renew their lease, this is what they said. They wanted to move to a rental that was less expensive. We talked about that just a second ago with Ali, so that kind of makes a lot of sense here. Looking back at the big thing, if you go to 17.72 off to the side, that's a better apartment, right? They're looking for a better apartment. That's what they said to us. You could say they're trying to find a new job location. These are the reasons. That was about 16%. Declining neighborhood. These are all things right now that are kind of out of our control, right? These are things that are happening in the background of these renters' lives that are just saying, hey, I can't stay in this apartment because something outside of your control is affecting that. If we look at the things that we can control, maybe not marital status, but we can control unhappy with management, right? This is something that goes back to what Jay Bear was talking about, this customer service component and attacking this through speed and communication, right? You also have unhappy with the apartment itself. This goes back to an operational thing, right? We want to make sure that we're providing for these people their home, right? Making sure it's up to par the way they want it to be. I want to present this finding to you in this way because I think it kind of illustrates what's going on. So big key finding of this is back in 2010, when we asked this question, 51% of respondents who said that they were not going to renew their lease at their current property said it was due to a change in job location. Thinking quite literally to just 30 minutes ago when Ali was talking about how work from home is something that has come up more recently. In 2023, that answer dropped to 16%. So contextualize things real quick here. If we were thinking about back in 2010, what things could we do to preserve a lease, right? Get them to renew. 41 or 49% of it, right, was just all we had to work with. 51% of the people were gone just immediately. And then it was things like marital status, some of the other things that we were out of our control. But now, right, at only 16% as a change in job location, we're opened up to about half of the renewals that we have the ability to salvage through something that we're doing. So, big piece here is this is where your renters are coming from. This is where they are beginning their search. Stage 2 here is what are renters looking for? Chelsea touched on this a second ago, but it's this, right? We asked them what type of rental property were you interested in or open to for leasing for your next home? And this is what we got. Maybe a little bit hard to see, but 66% of respondents said apartments. and 58% of them said single-family homes. This was a multiple choice select, right? They had the ability to say apartments and single-family homes and townhomes, or they could just say, I only want apartments, or I only want single-family homes, or if they were creepy, they could just say, I only wanted a condo rental. And I think the idea here is this. There is a preference by the lifestyle range here. If you look at students, they were at a 75-ish% chance, or not percent chance, but they were interested in apartments at 75%, right? And at single families at only 40%. And as these lifestyle age ranges continue to increase, as we got up to the active adult, it was a flip-flop, right? Where single-family homes were more important to those who were further along in their life, and apartments were more important to those who were younger in life. That's just how we see this. Takeaway here, as people age, they tend more towards single-family home rentals. So, what rental do they want? The two largest sections of renters were this. They were either just looking for apartments or just looking for single-family homes. And talking about who runs the world, I also think it's important to showcase this. This is the preference breakdown by gender. If you look down at men right here, you'll see that they had a strong affiliation with apartments, right? They had a strong affinity for it. 70% of the respondents who were male that we asked them, what are you interested in finding, said apartments, while only a little above 50 said single-family homes. If we look at women, it was pretty even. About 60% in either case, so a little bit trickier. They were less sure of exactly what they wanted, more open to different things.
So we've talked about what it is that they're looking for exactly, and you know, as you can see, that the market is more open, you have more competition than you've ever had before. So we also wanted to find out a little bit more about when renters were starting to look for their next rental. And I want you to hear that I'm saying rental instead of apartment, because guys, this is the world we live in now. Is the world of rentals, not just renting apartment communities specifically. When is it that they're starting to look overall? How many months before your lease ending did you begin your search? The reason we felt this was important is because when we did that first behavioral study where we just watched what people were doing, they would open their computers and they would start looking around, and I would say, okay, when is it that you're looking to move? And then Marcus would try not to laugh out loud as someone would say, I don't know, in the next year or so. And I was like, what? Oh, okay. And so we're just deciding to look for a rental for fun? What is happening? But what was fascinating is that the majority of people were still saying that the months before they were looking to look for their search, for their lease to be up, was 3 months before or 6 months before. So you might wonder, okay, Chelsea, what has changed? We've known that, right? We start to get our notice to vacates about 60 to 90 days out. That's when we put our apartments up to lease. And we agree, it looks like things are the same until you dig a little deeper. So when we look at our historical data, we compared our answers from 2021. Now this isn't a long time ago. I don't know about y'all, but I still have like trauma from 2019, right? And that's 5 years ago. 2021 is in the recent past. And in 2021, 12% of folks were looking for their rental 6 months in advance, and we see 2 short years later, that number is up to 20%. So the trend is that more people, and we saw this across every number, are looking earlier and earlier and earlier. And y'all know I love our industry, so I'm not picking on us. But what I want to bring to your attention is, what are we doing? We are still maintaining that we're going to lease at the same time frame, and I understand that there's difficulties with that, but we've really got to figure out how to market to and lease to the people who are interested well in advance, because it's really changed. One of the other things that was really interesting was we looked at this by lifestyle, so that's breaking that up, that life stage, and then also by generation. And what I want you to see is that the students, I'm not going to pick on my youngins, but our students were the ones who were still saying, like, I'm good 3 months in advance, that's fine. But as you look through, people were looking earlier and earlier and earlier. So across the other generations, 6 months got more popular as you got older overall. Stage 4 of the renter's journey is really when things get heating up and get exciting.
This is exactly where it gets exciting, right? We've already decided where the renters come from. We've decided when they start looking and what they're looking for. And so this is really where these one-on-one interviews really started to showcase some interesting things. So the search begins dramatically.
Dun, dun, dun.
We asked, how early in your search would you have applied or paid a deposit to hold an apartment, if available? And what we got is exactly what we expect, right? About 2/3 of everyone saying 30 to 60 days out is when I would decide to put a deposit down to hold a unit so I could move into it when it's available. But what's really interesting here is that there's 1/3 of available renters out right now that said 60 plus days. Yeah, I'm down for that. I will go ahead and put a deposit down. So I think there's some opportunity here. Now, getting into the real meat here, we asked this: which site did you begin your rental search with? And you will have to just take this first. 38% of the respondents that took our survey here indicated that they started their apartment search with a Zillow group website, whether that's Zillow, HotPads, Trulia. While 27 indicated they started their search on apartments.com, and 26 indicated on Google. Now, if you're wondering where we got these website choices from, again, this comes from our one-on-one interviews where people were showcasing to us, I started here. What's really interesting about this particular question is we followed it up. We said, why did you choose this site? And what we got was a lot of cases because it was the first site that showed up. And what that indicates to us is maybe they didn't actually start their rental search on apartments.com or their Zillow or anything like that. Maybe they actually started on Google, but the fact is people will still find themselves likely on one of these sites, whether they start on Google and end up there by just looking at the search or by actually visiting these sites first.
So I know you would think that as a researcher, I probably love to be right. But actually, the fun comes in for both Marcus and I when we are wrong.
I like to be right.
And I want to tell you that one of the things that I thought, one of my original hypotheses when we were doing this, is I thought, well, surely Jeff Goldblum, he probably appeals to a certain age. And for those of you that don't know, he is the apartments.com spokesperson. He's fantastic. I love me some Jeff Goldblum. And so I had made the assumption that maybe as the generations were younger, they would be relying on Google more, or maybe they didn't know who apartments.com was, or they didn't know who Zillow was, and we were wrong. So our youngest generations, Gen Z, they actually overwhelmingly were choosing to start their search with Zillow or HotPads. And you can see that this carries throughout the age ranges. As you get older, then you are more likely to start out your search with a Google-specific search. But if you were younger, you were more likely to go directly to a website and not start your search with Google. And I think this is a huge finding that we have not really understood in the past as a group in multifamily and as marketers, and this is going to be really impactful as we continue to try to market to renters. One of the other things that we found in our site preferences and key findings is that if a prospect was looking to Zillow to find the information that they needed, it was often because they were looking for a rental. So I don't want to oversimplify, but our folks who were saying, yes, I'm open to an apartment or a single family home, they started on Zillow. Our folks who were saying, I am more interested in looking for an apartment specifically, or I'm only interested in an apartment, started their search more likely on apartments.com. So again, we really need to be careful about how we are talking about what we're looking for or what our prospective renters are looking for. Is it that they're looking for a rental or an apartment specifically? And how can we make sure we're marketing and advertising to both? The other thing that we found is when they were using Google, near me searches or these types of searches were one of the #1 ways people looked. So when they used Google as their search of choice, it was because they were, as an example, in a cool neighborhood, at a cool restaurant, and wanted to know if there were rentals around them that were available. Near me type searches are really, really prominent. We also saw a lot of near me around universities. So people would look for apartments near wherever it is that they're looking. Zillow is much more prominent when looking for rentals outside of apartments, like we already said, but the big difference here was it went from 25% of respondents to 37% who used Zillow when they were looking for any other rental other than just an apartment specifically.
So, if you were wondering what all these sites have in common, rhetorical question, they all have map features. And so we decided to ask, did you use a map feature at any point during your rental search? And the answer we got was overwhelmingly yes, right? About 75%, 3/4 of every respondent said, I used a map feature in some way. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. What Chelsea just said about the Google searches is near me, right? They were already using spatial language when deciding how they wanted to search for their next rental. And these map sites, right, sites that have maps that actively list out the listings, make it easier to do these types of searches. Key finding here, everyone uses a map, right, if it's available, but there is a negative correlation with age. And what I mean is if you look at Gen Z, they were about 80% saying, yes, I used the map when I was doing a search. And if you go all the way down to the boomer generation here, you see it's a little bit above 60. And again, same thing with the lifestyle, right? Students really close to 80. So, if you're in the student housing world, it's really important to think about maps as a solution here. And as you go all the way down to the elder generation, right, it's again just a little bit above 60. But I think the phrasing here is what we should really focus in on, right? There's a negative correlation with age, but listen to this. I don't mean to say that as the Gen Zers, the student lifestyle, as they get older, they're going to stop using the map. I think it's actually the inverse, right? I think as these people get older, the map is still going to be an important feature that they're using, right? The kids born of the digital age, computers in the aid of searching, right? This is going to be something that's important. So the whole idea that people were using these sites for was to bring everything together to create what we call a short list of communities, properties, rentals that they wanted to dive just a little bit further and do some more research on. And that's what they did, right? So we asked, how many properties did you shortlist for further research? And this isn't just a cute little graphic off to the side. This is the actual number. The number is 4. They're looking for about 4 properties, communities, rentals to do active further research on. Let me put that number into perspective for you for a second. Back in 2021, when we asked this question, right, the average response here was about 14 as the short list. That number has decreased dramatically down to 4 to 5. And when we look at the, again, preferences of men and women, specifically, you get women are about 4.2 on their short list, so around 4. So not only are they more open and inclusive, right, to different types of rentals, their short list is actually smaller too. So stage 5, I have done everything up to this point. I have created my short list. What do I got to do, right? We got to start doing the research. And one of the best places that you could do research for a community that you are considering is the website, right? So did you look at a property's website for specific information? And this actually came, again, from these one-on-one interviews. We watched the way people step through this process. They started on one of these other sites, right? Just Googling generally, I'm looking for properties in this area. Or they're using Zillow or apartments.com looking for properties around a university, around a certain neighborhood. And then once they figured out the short list, they really condensed it, right? This funnel effect. And so this is what happens, right? About 80% of respondents have said, yes, if the property website exists, I want to use it. How many times did you visit that property website? I think this is really important because I think sometimes we think they might only go to the website 1 or 2 times or something like that, but this is actually a really wonderful place that we can make a connection with our prospective renters. So key finding here, everyone uses the property website if it exists. They visit it 4 times on average, right? So preliminary checks through it, doing a little bit deeper research into it, a little further research, and then finally saying, hey, this is it. I think I'm ready. I don't want to just give you the information. They're going to your website. You're all extremely smart marketers, right? You know that. They're going to the website. But what I think is really important here is what are they looking for on the website? And so we asked them, what features are you actually going and looking at? And you'll find that pricing, 85% of respondents said, yes, I'm going to the website specifically for pricing. I want to see that. Now, again, this is multiple choice select, so they are open and willing to find more answers on this. And you will find that pictures is another thing that people are using on the website. So making sure we have nice quality pictures is important. The availability of the unit or the rental itself, 78%. And then floor plans sitting at 71%. But this is the big data set. This is everything. It didn't matter if they were looking for condos or townhomes or apartments or single family. This is just everything. If we took a subset and said, hey, I only want to know what's important on the website or what people are looking at a high level. If they're only interested in apartments, the numbers change just a little bit. Pricing's still number one, but what jumps up from 4th place all the way to 2nd place is floor plans. So making sure you have some idea of the floor plans on your site. This is something that if they are looking for an apartment rental, they're interested in. Most viewed features across the board were price and pictures, just showed you that. But what's really interesting is price, right? Price is viewed more with age. And I think that makes sense, right? If you think about it, if you're a student, you're maybe not as concerned with money, right? Maybe mom and dad are footing the bill. You might have financial aid, something like that, right? And as you move up in age here, young professionals concerned a little bit more. Maybe you got roommates, so maybe you're not as concerned yet. The adult stage, right? This is when your bills are probably maxed out to as far as they could possibly be. You're not quite at the highest income yet, so you are concerned with price. And then active adult, right? Our bills haven't really increased. We're probably at the height of our earning at this moment, so less interested. And then all the way up to the elder, right? So retirement age, we're really trying to penny pinch, save the money where we can, more concerned with price at that point. We also had people rank, right, the importance of these features on the websites. 1 being the most important, 4 being the least important. Maybe no surprise here, but price, right? People want to see price on the website. Having the answers to the top questions on our website, right? So we don't have to worry about providing that information. Pricing is a huge one here.
So I have to tell you all that while Marcus and I were doing this research, we laughed a lot. One of the things that we laughed about the most was as we were doing this behavioral part of the study, I could not get over Gen Z and their behavior. One of the things that we saw over and over and over again is what we would later come to call the just vibes generation, okay? We watched them search and it would look something like this. They would start clicking around and they would click and click and click, and then they would go to a property website and look for about 2 seconds and then hop off and go to look back at another option on their short list. And me being a researcher, or Marcus on his interview, we would go, whoa, 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 what just happened? What's going on? Like this community looked like it met everything that you needed, all of your interests. What is the deal? Why did you just click onto their website very quickly and leave? And I heard, the vibes are off. And I was like, oh, cool. We're making decisions about the biggest bill we're going to have per month by vibes are off. I love this for us. But it was true. We saw this over and over and over again, that the overall look and feel of the website and the vibe was either something they liked, and it was very visual based and easy information and really an easy user experience, or it wasn't, and you have about 2 seconds to influence that decision. I could not get over that when Jay was speaking earlier about how you don't know that you lost them over being fast, over speed. You also don't know that you lose them, your prospective renters, over whether your website passes the vibe check. And so I want to bring this to your attention because it's incredibly important. And if anybody else coins the Just Vibes generation, y'all make them pay me, okay? Because we came up with it. So we are now to the next stage of the renter's journey. The renter is experiencing some bumps in the road. So we hopefully passed the vibe check, right? You've done all the things right. You've been listed on the right sites. You've got great pictures, great floor plans. They're like, I am ready to find out some more information. Now, I know that when Jay was talking, all of you in this room were probably thinking, we are fantastic at being responsive. Yeah? Everyone? Okay. So we asked the question, during your search, did you have any email inquiries go unanswered? And while we did okay, and we had some people say no, what I really want you to focus on is how many people said yes. So this is, they never got an answer. Not they got an answer 2 hours later or 4 hours later or 6 days later. We had almost 40% of prospective renters say, I sent an email and they ghosted me. It was crickets. I never, ever received a response. In 2023, that is, y'all, I hope it's okay to say in a room of friends, frankly, unacceptable. This cannot be what we do. We can't not respond 40% of the time. And unfortunately, The same was true across generation, but an interesting thing that we found is that the younger generations, who we would say are probably the ones who are renting more, experienced this more than the older generations. Now, we don't know if it's because maybe they sent more emails, but we do know that they reported a higher percentage, almost 50% of their emails being unresponded to. So if you are looking to capture that renter's attention, and you are going to do it with speed, and you're going to be responsive, and you're going to ensure trust, we've got to get better. So you might be thinking, well, Chelsea, we answer the phone. That's why we couldn't get to our emails. But unfortunately, that's not true either. We found almost the exact same percentage, almost 40% again, of phone calls, and I want you to see how we phrased this, went unanswered, and we tried to give y'all a mulligan. Guys, we did. No callback. Not only did we not answer, we didn't call them back ever. We are making it incredibly difficult for renters to find the information that they need. And we wanted to break this down a little bit further because I thought, I'm a Texas girl, and I was like, well, we have a lot of apartments. Maybe we are just so busy in Texas specifically that some other areas where it's maybe not as competitive is maybe they're doing better. So if you're in the room and you're like, oh, girl, I am in the Northeast and we have got it down pat. No offense to our northern friends, but that is not the case either. Across the board, we are not doing well with this information. We are not doing a great job of responding back to prospective renters. And I want you to pay attention here because if you've got multiple properties in multiple markets all across the US, these areas that are red, we really want to dig in and see, are these your communities too, right? What are we doing? How are we doing? Are we beating these averages? Because overall, these were the unanswered emails by region. We also looked at the same information with the calls, and shockingly, we saw this same pattern happen that even though we like to say that Gen Z might not be calling as much, Gen Z is who reported the most phone calls unanswered. Now, I have a little theory, this is just a Chelsea theory, not a Jay Turner theory, but I have an idea that the younger generation is used to information being given to them and being able to access it quickly. So when they can't find it, they are really willing to reach out. Like they're trying to give you a shot, right? They're saying like, hey, I couldn't find this, so can you tell me the answer to my question? And I think as our older generations are looking, they are just like, no, I'm self-reliant, I'm gonna find it myself, I'm gonna keep searching. The last thing I'm gonna do is reach out for help and ask someone. So we don't know if that's official, but we do think that that could be a little bit of what's happening here is just that behavioral change in generations. And I know you're probably wondering, okay, show us the map again. Because on that map, the phone calls were maybe not great or the emails were not great. What did the phone calls look like? Well, we have a lot of that same pattern. So we've got a red area in kind of the Great Lakes, Mideast, New England area. We're doing a little bit better as we move to the west, but it's still not fantastic. Especially in a day of automated responses, of AI, of chatbots, of all of these things that we have. I know it's really hard to staff our properties right now, but I had really expected these numbers to be a lot different.
So if you were putting yourself in the shoes of a prospective renter and you're thinking about what stage we're at now, right? You've gone through the whole process of deciding that you were going to look for another rental, when you're going to do it, all this stuff. You've made your short list. And now you've started the research process. You've done your own personal research by looking at the website, trying to get whatever information you can, whatever questions you can't get answered. You've tried to reach out to the property, right? You've sent an email, hopefully it's been responded to. You've tried to give them a call, it's hopefully been responded to. But now, right, we're going to look at the opinions of other people, and you could not come to a Jay Turner Research Summit and us not talk about online reviews, right? It's just how this works. So, regarding reviews of potential rentals, do you generally, and then we let them kind of get a little free rein here, ignore star rating and just read the reviews? Check to see how many 4 and 5 star reviews they have? How about 1 and 2 stars? Do you only read the comments of negative reviews? Or do reviews not even affect your entire searching process? And I am happy and pleased to report to everyone that the 4 and 5 star reviews, right, 45%. And if we dive a little bit further into this, reading positive reviews is the largest majority every step of the way. And again, if we think about this, Gen Z, 52% saying, I only like to use the 4 and 5 star reviews, right, as I'm looking at these properties. I want to see what positive things are being said. As you move down or up in the age generations here, that slowly steps off. But I don't say or mean to say that as people get older, they will probably stop using online reviews. I think that's not the case. It's the opposite. It's only going to become more prevalent as time goes on. Key finding here, we are seeing a shift in the interest in positive reviews year over year. We look back at this same question that we did back in 2021. 27% of people said, I like to use the 4 and 5 star reviews, while 64% said, I like to use all reviews just kind of in general, right? Inclusive, doesn't matter what it is. 2023, that number jumped up, right, to 45% saying they like to use the 4 and 5 star reviews, and 85% of respondents saying they use reviews in some way, in some factor. How are they using it? This question right here. After further research, has a low rating or bad review ever made you decide to not contact or tour that property? 60% of people said yes to this, right? This is where the short list starts to get even shorter. This is when we start cutting things out. If we take a look at this in the form of generations, the younger prospects decide not to tour based on online reviews at a higher rate. And again, I only anticipate this growing larger and larger. And again, if we break this down into men and women again just being slightly difficult, right? Oh, sorry.
Say that once. One time, y'all, that's all we got.
No, but you'll see right here, right? Men, 54% saying yes to the fact that if there is a bad review, they might not tour that property. Women, on the other hand, 65%, right? Much more choosy with the time and place. Their short list smaller, they're using reviews in a slightly different way.
So, we have made it through some of the search, hopefully. We've gotten our short list. We have figured out whether the reviews match our vibes. I'm gonna keep saying vibes, y'all. I can't stop. I can't quit it. And now the renter is looking to complete their research and is ready to tour. So you're probably wondering, well, how many properties did they decide to tour? And it is pretty fascinating to me that it was only 3. So your chances of becoming that one property they select have gotten narrower and narrower. We are now only touring 3 properties, and this was touring virtually or in person. It wasn't specific to one or the other. The key finding here was that the short list for apartments that they're deciding to tour has shrinked over the years. And I found this fascinating when we looked back at our historical data. In 2016, you had 5.2 properties being toured. So pretty good odds, right? 1 in 5. 2021, we were down to 4. Now 2023, we are down to 3. This is wild to me to see that these numbers are just going down year over year over year, and there are less properties making that list. So we asked, okay, we know that a bad review maybe made it where you decided not to have an apartment community on your short list, but has a low star rating or bad review ever made you decide not to apply or lease a property you had previously shortlisted? And before I tell you the answer to this question, which you guys might guess why we were going to talk about it, I want you to know that we had seen this behavior as well. We watched as people made their properties, go visit the property website, click over and look at the reviews, and then mark a bunch off their list. And then they would say, okay, these are the properties that maybe I'm going to go tour, and then they would mark a bunch off their list about reviews. And so we watched that as they bounced back and forth between their selection and then verifying their selection with the review process, these numbers got smaller and smaller. And that's because when you get all the way down to deciding to apply or not, again, they're going back to check those reviews again. They're going back to look and say, okay, out of these 3, only toward 3, which of these, as I jokingly said, doesn't talk about rats or roaches, the R&R of the apartment world that we don't want to say, right? This is how they're making that decision further along. So these key findings were important, especially across generations. We have seen this over and over again. The younger prospects decided not to apply at a higher rate. So they decided not to tour at a higher rate based on reviews and decided not to apply at a higher rate based on reviews. And I can now say, yes, I'm pickier apparently, because again, we saw that same trend with our females deciding more, 65% versus males, 54%, not to lease at a property based off of the reviews.
You know, a question you probably have at this point is, what types of reviews matter, right? what categories of reviews are the most important, what cuts your community out of the list based on what's being said in the reviews. And we asked the respondents to rank these categories for us, and what we found is that the top 3 categories that would take a community out of consideration for either touring or applying were condition of the unit, number 1, cleanliness, and then security, right? How perceptually safe the community seemed based on the online reviews, right? So these are the top 3 things. That's interesting, that's fun, but again, I think we're at a place where we have to be able to separate out what's important to the generations. And so if you're thinking about the younger generations and what's important to them, number 1 was maintenance, right? They cared more about the maintenance. Communication was another huge piece of this. And then finally, pests, right? Didn't want roaches or rats in their unit. The older generations said cleanliness was the number 1 thing for them, right? They were really concerned with cleanliness, and probably no surprise, they don't want parties at their community, right? Noise. Didn't like to see noise.
So we've walked you through all of this information to give you a really good overview of what it takes to be that final property. And now we want to show you once again what it looks like, because I thought this was imperative for us to understand how the prospective renter is looking and deciding. So we're going to walk you through the apartment elimination process. It sounds sad, but it's actually great, because now you're armed with the information you need to be that community that is the first selected. We took a 2-bedroom, 1-bath prospect. So this is somebody who's looking for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. They're looking, hopefully, for an apartment rental only, and they're located within the Houston city limits. So when I showed you that slide earlier that had the little houses and apartment buildings on it, that was representative of the actual results, and we're going to take a little walk in their shoes. So when they were looking for rentals that are 2-bedroom in Houston, this is actually representative of what they would have found if they searched that on one of the top ILS sites. This is how many results came back for them. And I always forget the exact number because Lindsay Osborne and I talked about it so much, but it was about 500 something overall how many of the results were. So now we are hoping that as the apartment world, we've wooed them with amenities, with our pools and all the great things that we have to get them where they wanted to lease with us, maybe versus a single family rental. So now we're down to this. These are the rentals that are an apartment that qualify for that situation, the 2-bedroom. Now we've decided to look at the apartments that have the informative websites. So we've narrowed it down even further. Hopefully you're still in one of these lists, right? Hopefully you passed the vibe check. Now we've decided that we've got to narrow it down to properties that we're going to consider after that review comparison. So we've looked at the reviews, we've made that decision, and we have said, okay, out of all of this huge market, all of this broad market, we're now down to these communities that were available to select from. But what about the properties that made the short list? This is how many are left, right? A little over 4 out of that initial search. Now we have the properties that we're going to tour down to 3. We've continued to compare reviews again, there's only 2. And finally, we have a winner. And we hope that it will be one of your communities. Now we said all of this, and we said in Houston. The real reality is, to bring it back to one of the first things we looked at, is that job location is no longer the number 1 primary reason to choose. So one of the other things that we saw often is that we would ask renters, where is it that you're looking? And we would hear something like this: Nashville, or Portland, or Austin. And I was like, oh, all of it? And they were like, uh-huh. And I'm like, oh, okay. Are we gonna narrow it down at all? And they were like, no, just gonna look around and see what we find. So I wanted to make sure that you saw this illustration for Houston, but I want you to understand that this is not just the reality of all of the market that you have to compete against. It is also probably apartment communities and single family home rentals in other markets as well. We no longer have the luxury of competing against the properties that are in a 3-mile radius. Y'all remember those good old days when we would do our market survey by 3 or 5 mile radius? That is really over. We are now competing on a national scale with other properties just like yours that are maybe in Portland, Nashville, Austin, we're full, don't move there. I live there, no more, we're not taking any more. And we want to make sure that this entire process, you had a great grasp of what that renter's journey looks like and how hard it can be for them to find what they need and how hard it can be for them to figure out the information that they need next, the timing that's correct, the vibes check out, the phone is answered, the email's returned, because it's really impactful, and at the bottom, or the end of the day, it's affecting your bottom line. It's important information to know, and we look forward to doing this study again. And the actual research study will be printed and released in early January, and we'll make sure all of you get a copy of it. In the meantime, you can contact myself or Marcus, although Marcus said, please don't, as a joke, that he has answered plenty of questions about this, but we would love now to answer your questions if you have any as well. And so we've got some mic runners. They're going to come out and ask or let you ask a few questions. Yeah, who got it first? Brian?
So I think I have about 67 questions I jotted down.
Okay.
I will not ask all of them at once. So one of the things I'm most curious about was from the observational one-on-ones you guys did. And you already commented on the fact that like where people said they were searching like didn't necessarily correspond to where they actually would first discover properties.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like for the people that sort of said, oh, I'm searching on Google, how often did they actually end up going straight to a property site, like through a paid search ad or something, versus how many times did people search on Google and in reality, their first stop was a Zillow listing or an apartments.com listing? And then part two of that is, given that the ILSs generally don't make it very easy to actually click through to our websites, when people had gone through and done searches on the ILSs and said, oh, I like property A and C, how did they then tend to actually find the property websites?
Okay, so this is actually a great question. So I do want to clarify something in case it was confusing. So when you think about this, when you think like I'm looking on a listing site, whatever it might be, and then they were looking at the property website, I do actually want you to think about it almost like a dual monitor situation, because while we didn't see dual monitors, what we saw is dual windows. So they would look at whatever they were looking at to get kind of their reference of what their options were, and then they would say, oh, and I'm going to use an example, I don't know, Grand Oaks at whatever, and they would actually open up Google and then type Grand Oaks at blah, 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 blah to go to the specific property website. So we're looking at a big list and then we're typing in a specific search for that specific property website to go see what that property website looked like. Who else had a question?
So for the data set that you were using, was it desktop versus mobile? Was there any mobile that was used to get some of this data? Because I think, especially on the Gen Z side, without using mobile, the data is very skewed.
Yeah, so what we actually did is we did not qualify for people. We want to know how you look on whatever device, right? What we did is we said, show us how you search, show us how you look. How do you start looking? And what was interesting is not yet, at least, no one said, hang on, let me go grab my cell phone and show you. We got to see what they were doing on the computer, but that doesn't mean the same behavior wasn't.
Well, I will actually say that that's not necessarily the case. What we noticed a lot of is that when we asked them the question like, hey, will you please show us how you searched? We got background information like, okay, like you weren't sitting at a computer screen all day. How did this run through? It was like, well, during my lunch, I pulled out my phone in my car and I looked at this for X many hours, right? Got really granular detail on things like that. And then, Google put out this presentation here recently that just said like, it doesn't really matter. People spend like on average 14 hours trying to figure out where they're going to decide to lease or buy their next home. So you can't expect that people are just sitting at their computer for that time period. I think the understanding here is that it is a little bit different, right? There's differences between the way that people are electing to use the desktop search or mobile search, but it didn't really change the way that people used Google to search. And so to kind of just go back to what Brian was asking a second ago, what happened was people would go on there and say, I want rental near XYZ thing. That's pretty much how everyone started. And rarely, if ever, was like a property's organic search at the very top, right? We can't compete with the SEO power of like apartments.com or Zillow or Trulia, HotPads, these types of things, right? So those were the first types of organic searches. And you get like the first 5 searches on Google organically, right? Get 70% of the click-throughs. You can do this search yourself, right? If you pulled out your phone right now and said, apartments near River Oaks, Houston, you won't get an organic property website at the start. You'll get, again, the ILSs here. So that's how these searches went.
Yeah, they looked the same. The behavior was the same regardless of the screen. And we know that they're looking at all the different screens, sometimes simultaneously, and their search went from phone to desktop, et cetera. Yes.
So I have a question about the touring, but I do have a comment on the vibe. And that is, there's plenty of websites I go to that I can't stand, and I will not be on them. But I think it's also the ones that maybe the Gen Z people like more.
Yeah.
So I'm not the renter. I need to remember that, I guess. So on the touring, we've certainly noticed a lot of less touring. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that I know a lot of people are actually renting without even touring, right? But I feel like we've also seen a lot more people that come in and then they're dissatisfied because, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was, because they never even came by. They didn't look, they didn't see, they didn't smell, they didn't anything, you know. And I was wondering, did y'all have any kind of research on that at all about, and then obviously how that affects your renewal rates later? Because the very first thing is I thought, oh, this wasn't the neighborhood I thought, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So we do. One of the big things that caused the disconnect between not touring and then the lease dissatisfaction was the quality of pictures. I think sometimes we get in the habit of selecting maybe the best pictures, and maybe it's an updated unit, right? And then they come in, rent a unit, only to find out, hey, we didn't actually renovate this unit. It's still like the old model, so sorry about you, but you already signed the lease, right? And so that's one of these things. We did put out a research probably about 1.5 years ago that talked about the sense of community at the property. And while that sounds like a really ambiguous thing, the whole idea behind it was if you fail to meet the expectations that you set during the whole leasing process, and that is if you didn't provide them the type of unit they thought they were going to get, it's ruined. Like, you're not going to come back from that. Burned bridges take twice as long to build, right? So that's just one of the things. And I can send that to you.
I think we have time for just a few more. Yes.
When we were talking about the email and call response versus no response, did you guys have any data or information, insight into when you look at specifically the call side of things, people who left messages versus didn't leave a voice message and what their experience was? And then also when we look at it from comparing email to phone call contact type, did you notice anything, or do you have any data that suggests that their level of urgency or their timeline for looking for their move varied between the two contact types? If I'm an email, am I softer touch? Am I longer out? If I'm a phone call, am I more urgent? Do I want to move next week? You know, what's my situation? Did you guys see anything in that space at all?
No, not any specifics around whether the urgency was higher for a move-in for a phone call or an email. I will say that what we thought was that they're reaching out for information that they want to know. So I think the fact that they are reaching out means their urgency is higher, period, because they are further along in the funnel of trying to figure out what it is they want. And so we didn't have the details around that, but that is something we can look for in the future and see if we can sparse out. Is there any difference? Is somebody calling? Does that mean they want to move in 30 or 60 days? And what did we learn? We're going to charge them more for that luxury, right? From Jay? Or is it the opposite? You know, what is that? We can definitely look into that more. I think we have time for one more question. Jay?
Just an observation more than a question. A great job, both of you. Thank you for such compelling data and presenting it so nicely. I do a lot of work in the higher education industry with colleges and universities, and this idea of vibes is so prevalent there. In that industry, you've always tried to convince students or their family to research curriculum and dorms and dining hall, and look how many clubs we have. And now increasingly, it's just like, it just doesn't feel right for me, which has huge implications for website design, multimedia, and now increasingly, I think something that people in this room should ponder, exactly how you do your tours.
Yeah.
So you've got your student guide that walks people around campus, and the script of that wrap is much, much different now, giving more time for sort of vibes and getting more students involved with, well, just ask honest questions about what it's like to be here, et cetera. So the importance of actual data is going down, but maybe we do live in a post-factual world.
No, I cannot agree more. It was actually one of the things that we thought was really interesting was how many of the people that we talked to were asking lots of questions of a leasing agent. I mean, things that I was like, have you heard of Google? Because you could find that out very easily. Like, I am stunned that you're gonna go to an apartment community and ask a leasing agent some of these like very, really important to your decision questions. I thought you would maybe do a little more research on your own, but they really did rely a lot, especially our younger generations, on getting that information from a leasing agent, and so that tour is incredibly important. Well, thank you all so much for your attention and your time. If you have any questions, grab us later on, email us. We'd be happy to walk you through any of the study. We appreciate you all so much.